In the lead up to the midterms, the banks now have a new target for a lot of their campaign spending. This time, it's on so-called moderate Democrats. Now, why is that? Well, apparently earlier on, and I've reported on this, these Senate Democrats backed the first easing of financial rules since the 2008 financial crisis. And now, these same Democrats are getting a lot of money in return. Reuters is reporting that commercial banks have so far donated a total of $2.5 million to Senate Democrats in the 2018 election cycle. That is the largest sum that they have donated to Democrats since 2008, according to the Center for Responsive Politics. Now, of the 20 Senate candidates receiving the most money from these banks during the 2018 cycle, 15 of them are Democrats. So that is a majority of Democrats. So now the banks are saying, hey, we're going to start funneling money at you. Oh, that's interesting. Now, who are they? Well, some of them are not going to be a surprise. Senators Heidi Heitkamp, John Tester, and Joe Donnelly. So the same Democrats who helped push through the May legislation are now the top 3 recipients of donations from these big banks, according to that data. Lovely. Now, the other 12 Senate Democrats are also considered moderates, which is basically another word for I take money from big corporations. And I do the corporation's bidding. Now, these Democrats fight every effort to constrain the banks and prevent them from crashing the economy just like they did in 2008. So the incredibly weak Dodd-Frank legislation, that is what these corporate Democrats are basically chipping away at. Now, not only that, but these same Democrats have been, going against the tone that progressives have been taking. And look, they're not happy, right? How dare you attack my banker buddies? No, they're not terrible people. We're on the cocktail circuit all the time. My banker friends are nice. They give me money in my campaigns. Now, people like Elizabeth Warren, for example, and Bernie Sanders speak out against the bankers and their largesse. In fact, Bernie Sanders just released a bill that would break up the big banks. And so here are these banks going, oh shit, we need to stop what's going on in the Democratic Party. We need to strengthen the corporate Democrats, the weak Democrats that take our money and help us with the help of Republicans, with the wholly bought off Republican Party, to loosen regulations on us. In fact, according to Reuters, the sector hopes that boosting moderates will constrain the big bank bashing wing of the Democratic Party, including Senator Elizabeth Warren, a likely presidential candidate in 2020, and Representative Maxine Waters, who is poised to chair the committee overseeing banks if Democrats win the House. So, look, no mention of Bernie Sanders, of course, but Sanders is on their mind. And not to say that Elizabeth Warren has been a slouch when it comes to banking regulation. She definitely is. Effective. Now, and she definitely scares the banks. Now, here's some more context, right, into the spending. So this marks an interesting trend. This is the first time since 2012 that the banking industry has actually given more to Senate Democrats than they have to Republicans, according to the Center's data, which is based on federal records released later last month. Now, the sector ended up spending about $2.5 million to Senate Democrats and $1.8 million to Republicans this election cycle. By contrast, the industry gave $1.6 million to Democrats and $5.2 million to Republicans during the 2016 elections. So, now, you know why they're giving so much to the Democrats now? Well, it's because there's a chance the Democrats might win back the House and narrow the Republican majority in the Senate. And the reason I say that is because in the Senate, you've got a lot of Democrats that are defending their seats. People like Joe Manchin, people like John Tester, Heidi Heitkamp, etc., Joe Donnelly. These are the corporate Democrats, and they do not want these Democrats to lose their seats. Now you might say, well, wait a minute. We give money to Republicans, so wouldn't it be more beneficial if there's a Republican in our seat? Well, that's interesting. The reason that I think, and they talk about this a lot, is, well, we want things to be bipartisan. So that way, you know, look, if Republicans go and deregulate the banks on their own, people aren't going to like that. They're going to look at that and go, oh, here we go. Republicans, party of the rich, party of the bankers. We're going to support progressive Democrats instead, in order to take on these Republicans. But if they give money to these corporate Democrats and they manage to keep their seat, and then they do bipartisan deals with the Republicans, look at me, I'm reaching across the aisle, we're getting stuff done. That invokes a more positive image. And at the end of the day, the banks still get their money. They still end up getting deregulated. So that's the whole thing, right? So they're getting involved because they feel that they need to protect these so-called moderate Democrats. Now, the reason that they're so threatened is because here you have progressive Democrats that are running primaries, a lot of them that have actually won primaries, and that are starting to climb up the ranks in the Democratic Party. So the banks look at this and say, well, all our allies are gone. And if we don't fund these moderate Democrats, if we don't protect them against the Republicans, then the voting public is going to lose confidence in these so-called moderates, right? They're going to lose confidence in bipartisanship, and they're going to start to gravitate towards more progressive Democrats that are anti-bank. Because remember, most of the public hates the banks. Most of the public is still angry about the bank bailouts from 2008. In fact, you have a poll here from the Harris. It's a Harris poll on behalf of Better Markets. They said that 2/3 of registered voters are more likely to vote for a candidate who supports regulating Wall Streets and big banks when they talk about the economy. So the people don't like the banks. And the banks are like, oh shit, well, we need to fund corporate Democrats. And then, of course, you fund a corporate Democrat and you pit them against a Republican. Then you offer this explanation to regular people like, hey, who are we going to vote for? The Republican or the Democrat that sometimes votes in favor of us? Well, either way, the banks end up winning this game. That's what's going on here. Look, they don't care. The banks don't care if Republicans lose against moderate Democrats because on finance, they're the same. They serve the same donors. This is simply a way to stymie a progressive insurgency inside the Democratic Party. And of course, not only that, but by funding these corporate Democrats, they're also paying them back for the earlier deregulation that they did and to make sure that they won't be swayed by the Elizabeth Warrens of the party. In fact, the American Bankers Association, the top Washington bank lobby group, had contributed about $83,000 to Senate Democratic candidates this cycle and is leading the industry's push to regain bipartisan support, according to its CEO, Rob Nichols. Now, Nichols, I love the Orwellian name here. Oh, no, we're just here for bipartisan support, which just basically means we will rob you with both hands. Nichols, whose association has for the first time bought advertisements for 12 midterm candidates, including 4 Democrats, called enhancing the industry's political capability, quote, strategically important. Quote, this is rigorously bipartisan. If you support us, we want to support you. This is not about playing party favorites. For decades, banking policy was bipartisan up until Dodd-Frank. And we were excited to see a return to this bipartisanship. Now, look, before, of course, money in politics, yes, the Republican Party was definitely more pro-bank and pro-banker, but even they had limits, right? before Ronald Reagan and before, Nixon and all them, they at least were like, okay, we need regulation because the 1929 stock crash and depression that followed was horrible for everyone. Everyone. We don't want to go back to that. But since money entered into politics, and since these banks and other big corporations can start donating to our politicians, we have been on a consistent boom-bust cycle with the economy, with the banks continuing to crash the economy because they take more and more risks. And they're basically making money, off speculating on money, instead of doing what a bank is traditionally supposed to do. So, now, furthermore, according to the article, industry officials are now hoping the senators they support, and this is where some of that money comes into play too, will back further legislation easing capital market rules drawn up in a package that passed the House in July, but is yet to pass the Senate. That's what they want, more deregulation. He added that the industry is also anxious to ensure these new senators are around to oversee a swift implementation of May's new laws by banking regulators. That's what it's all about, folks. It's about the banks winning no matter who is in charge. They fund both sides so they can rob you with both hands. That's what this is about. You've got to get the money out of politics, man. Wow. Now, one more here. And this is a fun quote. Ken Benston, the chief executive of Bank Lobbyist Group, the Securities Industry and Financial Markets Association, and former Texas congressman, said that it was, quote, unfortunate that the industry continued, in his view, to be seen as, quote, a political piñata. Oh, you sad little bankers. Are you mad that people, rightfully so, blame you for what happened in 2008 and the subsequent bailout? Remember, you got bailed out by the taxpayers, but the people whose homes are underwater now, they didn't get bailed out. Regular people didn't get bailed out when they lost their jobs, but you did. You got bailed out, and you got a golden parachute. Now, I'm with Bernie Sanders on this one. We're going to have to break up the big banks, not deregulate them. However, this should disturb you. He said that the Democratic views in the banking industry are not monolithic, and he sees opportunities to work with members of the party. So Heitkamp, Tester, Donnelly, Brown, and a bunch of other congressmen, 15 so-called moderates, are pro-big bank. If you didn't know what I was going to say already, I'm just going to say it. Break up the banks and get the money out of politics. And I'm going to add one more thing in there. Primaries, right? You get rid of these corporate Democrats, and primary season has passed, I know. But there's always next time. But we've got to get rid of these guys, or else they're going to continue to vote in favor of so-called bipartisan bills that are basically gifts for the big banks. That's what this is about. Don't be fooled. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.